Hi, I'm Janice Perkins with Methods of Leaders. Thank you for joining us on another webinar. Today we're joined by Sally Helgesen. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and leadership coach who's been cited in Forbes as the world's premier expert on women's leadership. For 30 years, her mission has been to help women recognize, articulate, and act on their greatest strengths and help organizations build more inclusive cultures through the use of their leadership programs, workshops, and coaching sessions. She's a contributing editor for Strategy Business Magazine and a member of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Network and the New York and International Women's Forums. Thank you for joining me today, Sally.
Oh, Janice, it's wonderful to be with you and the people at Methods.
Thank you. Well, you know that your book has been a phenomenal impact on my life, and I can't wait for us to dive into this conversation for other women that are doing and fighting the same issues that you've experienced and all the women that you've helped. Last fall when we spoke, you concluded our interview by saying that the one thing that leaders need to start doing is essentially being okay with change. Being okay with not doing things the way we've always done them. And now that we're inching back toward this new normal, how has that shifted?
Well, I think we're inching pretty slowly, and I'm not sure it's a new normal. I think that we've entered a period where change is constant and often quite unpredictable. And that the best thing we can do with that is to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Many of us have had some degree of control over our lives, and we like our comforts, but we have to, I think that to survive this next period, to really make the most of it, we have to learn to be uncomfortable. The other thing I would say with that, and it kind of goes along with it, is this is a great time to get real, to be who you are. There's not a big opportunity cost in it, and we've got a lot to deal with, so it's really going to benefit if we can just put our real selves out there and work from that.
I love what you just said, because I'm definitely that type A kind of person who likes to hold things with a white knuckle grip. So as we have, as individuals, fought that loss of control over the last year or so, I know that it's also a default for us to pick things back up and think that we're in control and hit a new pace. So how do we fight that urge to recontrol again?
I think we fight that urge to recontrol by focusing. I can speak from my own experience, because this has been a very uncertain period for me, by focusing on relationships rather than focusing on, okay, this is a to-do list. How many items can I check off today? How efficiently can I run my schedule, which is my orientation. It makes me comfortable. To focus on the relationships and the depth and the warmth and the insights that we can bring to every single encounter, because I think what we've learned is they're very precious.
I love that. Absolutely. What are some new leadership trends that you have noticed coming about with your clients over the last year or so?
Well, first of all, what I said about getting real? This is a time when the leaders who are willing to be real, to show not their confusion and fear and, all kinds of frightening emotions, but to show that, to make clear that this is a tough time for them as well, and that they recognize that the people they're working with are also dealing with a certain degree of uncertainty. I find those are the leaders who are really having some success in this time, and who come at things with the idea of, how can I be of service to you? How can I be helpful to you? Rather than, okay, I understand this is a troublesome time, but, we've got to meet our X, Y, and Z objectives. I don't think that's, the most useful approach. And I think that leaders who take that approach are stumbling to some degree, and we notice it a bit more. Tom Peters had published a book this year called Excellence Now, and the subtitle is Extreme Humanism. And I think that's what's being asked of leaders in this environment. And the ones that I work with that I see doing a good job, they're manifesting that.
I love that you also created a fence, though, for those unsafe emotions that you don't portray to employees. Like being real also has its limitation because you're still supposed to be the leader. So go more in depth with that. How does a leader balance that, and where can they share those emotions?
Yeah, I think the key is not feeling that the emotions that the environment evokes are to some degree shameful, and that as a leader, we should be this person who has everything under control. So we can articulate that. You can say, this is a very tough time for me, and I'm not quite sure that it's not entirely clear to me that this is the absolute right direction. But here are the reasons that I think it's probably a good direction to pursue. So that we're framing it, we're not saying, I don't know what to do. It's so confusing to me too. That's abdicating your leadership, but not pretending that, yep, this is going to work. This is going to be successful. We're coming back to work, and, this kind of number in September and this kind of number in December, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think that's a good path.
Well, I love that you're saying that, because in essence, it also almost is pretending to the leader themselves too. In that if I tell myself that story so strongly, then I'm not pliable or flexible for other opportunities along that path, right?
You got it. That really sums it up. The way we give ourselves flexibility is to consider other narratives without buying into our default, that person must be a loser, or I've got to appear like this in every situation. Those kinds of narratives, those things we tell ourselves, reflect our fear. That's what they do. And there's fear all around us. So we can't pretend that doesn't exist, but we don't have to enact it. And the most powerful technique for doing that, in my experience, is to just rewrite narrative in the moment. This is kind of upsetting. Okay, I'm acknowledging it's upsetting, but what I realize is I really do have some capacity to deal with this situation because I dealt with that situation. So it's just a little tweak of the narrative, but it puts it in a positive frame and gives us a path forward.
That's a wonderful way to explain it. Thank you, Sally. So, are there major differences in how women handle decision making under pressure or crisis?
I think that, and of course, everything we say about women and everything we say about men is we have to acknowledge the women who are, there's a huge spectrum of female behavior and response, and there's a huge spectrum of male response as well. So these are not either ors by a long shot. But in general, I think that women in making decisions tend to consider a broader range of data. They tend to have a more active capacity for noticing things that are going on, noticing someone else's reaction, noticing a general maybe feeling among people, noticing resistance over here, noticing greater enthusiasm, unprecedented enthusiasm over there, whatever it is. I think women often notice more. They give more importance to those kinds of things that they notice. They are not just seen as, peripheral or beside the point, or the real point is, getting to action. They take them seriously. So I think that women often have a broader range of information to draw from, and this affects decision making in two ways. It can either help them make more informed decisions, and there's some fantastic pieces of research that show that happens with women, that when they consider the broad range of things, they can make more effective decisions. Or, and this happens as well, they can become indecisive because they're seeing so many different possibilities and different paths. and to some degree become either paralyzed or uncertain or prone to second guessing themselves. Like, I should make a decision, but what about this? What about that? And that's, the habit in How Women Rise that I call letting your radar distract you. And I think that really plays a role in decision making.
Well, I love how you said that too. And it's one of my favorite conversations is to talk about, as a leader, I need to know what my tend tos are, right? So what do I tend to do positively and negatively, and how that can impact me regardless of my gender. And it's an experience thing. And sometimes we default to certain behaviors that don't enable us to make the best decision in the moment, right?
That's exactly right. And that's why self-awareness is so important. And I think Tend To is a very good little tool for checking your own self-awareness. So once we have that self-awareness, then we can also check ourselves. Okay, am I making this decision because I'm made uncomfortable by this? Or am I making this decision because I'm comparing it to that other thing that may not actually be relevant? So it's good to have all the self-awareness we can bring into decision making can help us be more flexible and more astute.
So what are some leadership trends that you hoped that this crisis might get rid of, that we've been slow learners about?
I think I'd hoped that this crisis would bring more solidarity among people and less divisiveness and less tendency to criticize other people, and also more solidarity between the people who are leading organizations and employees. And with some certain wonderful exceptions, I don't think I've seen that to the extent that I anticipated it. Thinking back to periods of great crisis, World War II obviously is right up there, that impacted everyone and had the the polio epidemic. I went through that as a child, where parents spent all their time worrying about polio. Those things tend to bring people together. And so I thought that would happen. And it hasn't happened for a lot of reasons. And I think social media is certainly up there with the reasons. But yeah, that's been a disappointment.
I would agree with you so much. And I was in New York after 9/11. And I would say that there was, even though it was brief, there were still hand-holding moments where everyone came together. And I do feel like that the moment that you mentioned earlier where deepening relationships for a lot of us happened because we had more time and we were in isolation, but yet there didn't seem to be that solidarity that really came out of this. And so I follow you that it's something I had hoped would happen.
Yeah, I had hoped. And, I was in New York at 9/11 too. I had lived there for many years, and I saw a much greater solidarity among people. Certainly,
Yes.
People like they'd see cops or firemen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Is there any way I can help you? It wasn't just, oh, thank you for your service. It was genuine, looking people in the face and saying, you're saving us. And I saw that. I just saw a very different reaction, and it lasted for some time too.
No, agreed. So let me switch topics again on you. What is the most important thing you've learned since your book, How Women Rise, was published?
I think the most important thing I've learned, and this a little bit goes against what I was just saying, but they're very reconcilable, is how alike we are across culture. That's been, I often learn that with my books. This one I wasn't sure, but we've sold the book, I think it's around 19 languages so far.
Wow.
I just got my Mongolian edition straight from Ulaanbaatar. So, which is something I've never gotten before. So what has surprised me is how extremely resonant, number one, women in very different cultures find this. When I did the tour in Japan for the book, the most common response I got was, oh, we thought it was just Japanese women who had these habits. So there's an incredible amount, you get cultures that are so different. Japanese, Russian, Israeli, Nigerian. I mean, those are very, very, Brazil, those are as different as cultures can be. And the resonance people found was amazing. And the other thing which goes along with that was from the day the book was published, I heard from men who said, I identify with 4 of these behaviors. I identify with 3 of these behaviors. This describes me more than other books I've read about behaviors that can get in your way. So that has been also a real eye-opener to me.
Well, that touches on what you mentioned before, is that we are a spectrum of individuals, that we have tendencies as genders, but we're not cookie cutters. And I love that you get this impact through all people. And even from the standpoint that when you point out, it's really important for men to understand some of the gender differences, the ones that are typical, and how they can advocate for women in the workplace. So speak on that also.
Yeah, this is something that I hoped would happen that has. I didn't expect as many men to say that they identified with the behaviors as has happened. But what I did expect was that this book would be viewed as helpful to men in terms of providing a way to be more skillful and effective champions, supporters, mentors, sponsors, colleagues, bosses, direct reports for women. And that has really paid off. I have heard that over and over. We're requiring our men to read this because they don't understand the struggles that many women have claiming their achievements or expecting others to spontaneously notice and value their contributions, or putting their job before their career. So I've heard that, that helps me understand. I've asked 3 women if they would apply for this job, and every one of them told me that they didn't feel they were ready, and I thought they were completely ready. So reading the book, okay, I'm starting to understand why their overvaluing expertise might lead them to think that. So in that way, it has had great success that I hoped for and to some degree anticipated.
That's amazing. I also want you to touch on, as you see through this newfound digital hybrid environment that we're in, how have men and women as leaders differed with connecting over the digital airspace?
I really can't say that, because to me it's all over the place, all over the map. We don't quite. Erica Dewan published this fantastic book about digital literacy, and just recently it was really good, and it was about best practices for communicating digitally. And I see highly effective and very poor habits across the spectrum. Maybe women are a little more prone to use emojis or exclamation points constantly throughout their communication. But, I don't think any of us have fully mastered this skill. And it makes sense. We've been communicating in a certain way for a very, very, very long time. I think, young people, the bigger divide is generally between younger people and people who've been around for a while. As the younger people are more comfortable with the medium, but yet can be stunningly informal and adapt, the sort of protocols of communicating over dating apps for the workplace, and it's not very effective.
So in the past couple years, where have you seen the greater struggle, with employees or leaders?
Well, in terms of the impact this environment is having, it is definitely on employees. I mean, leaders can complain about this, that, or the other, but especially since the start of the pandemic, generally employees have had a very, very tough time trying to adapt, trying to deal with their family issues and, find a room in the house where they can control things. I mean, how many unmade beds have you seen in the back of Zoom calls? I'm still seeing them. So people are just still struggling with this. And And I think it's been pretty tough for employees. And also the other thing is employees don't have any support system. They can't say, hey, set me up a, fantastic looking backdrop and, move me over to this, that, or the other technology. They got to figure it out themselves. They don't have the support to do that. So I think employees, it's been much, much tougher for them.
Well, and I hear you saying a message there that looking for ways to support employees, whether it is even just technically, but emotionally as well, because they don't have the resources that people in the C-suite do have.
Yeah, and people, I remember a friend I know who married a guy who'd been a CEO, and he retired, and they went off to Europe or something. This a number of years ago. And she said he couldn't do a thing for himself, not a thing for himself. He couldn't, get out the hotel door. He was so used to having, okay, here's what you're doing, here's where you're going, here's how you get there, this is the person who will meet you, et cetera, et cetera. And any of us, who have people who work for us and take care of, who do our scheduling, our tech support, et cetera, we're used to that. And so we think, oh, I'm adapting really well, but we have those resources. And I don't think leaders are sufficiently aware of the impact it has on people. And I believe that's true because they're so willing to, completely change systems without sufficient training, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really good point. So you have a new book coming out in February of next year. Tell us all about it.
It's not coming out in February of next year. It's due in February of next year.
Oh.
It's coming out very early 2023. Okay. And this book really comes very directly out of the experience of how women rise, and some of the things I was talking about was seeing how helpful it was to men, and also watching, some of the divisions develop and how they also play out in the workplace. So this book is about rising together, how men and women, and also, just looking at various divides around ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, and age play out, how they can rise together, what we need to do. So it's offered in a spirit of what, as you pointed out at the beginning, I had really hoped would evolve out of this period, which is a spirit of solidarity.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just wrote it.
Yes. Well, I want to tell our audience too, your Methods of Leaders course is a full encompassing view of your book, How Women Rise, but digitally. Yes. And not only do you teach and train that entire course, but you do all these really in-depth interviews with female leaders around those very obstacles.
Yeah, it was, I think that the Methods of Leadership course that I did, which I, spent days taping, and we really worked on, speaking of having great support, I had fantastic support from the Methods team. I think that it's really, really worthwhile, and I hope that leaders and organizations say, hey, this is really going to help our people, not just our women, but our men, to understand and with the purpose of us rising together.
Well, and our announcement for the viewers today is that the certification pathway within Methods of Leaders for your course is coming out really soon, which means someone either training to be uplifted in an organization or looking for a new job can get certified in your course as something that can really help understand women in positions of leadership, becoming a stronger woman leader, or looking at how that works for inclusion in their organization.
Yes, exactly. And I think, it's going to be a great thing to be able to have this certification, because I've been doing all this myself, and now I'm working on another book, and I'm going to be transitioning to supporting that next book. So although I love doing the workshops and now virtual programs that I've been doing around how women rise, it'll be great to have other people out there in the world helping people with this material.
Thank you, Sally, so much. So if there's one thing you could leave the audience with today, what would you like to share?
I think what I'd like to share is this, my own commitment to us rising together. I feel that some of the divisiveness that is in the general culture has worked its way into organizations with how some of the diversity training is done. It focuses on unconscious bias and sort of uncovering the negative side of ourselves. And I feel that it's really time to shift to looking actively all the time for that common ground, and the common ground across levels, appreciating the strategic insights and talents that people who are not at a senior level can bring because of their embedded knowledge. I think that it's really past time to do that. And I see organizations moving forward on that. So I'm rather optimistic that we will find a path through this extremely challenging period.
Thank you, Sally. Now, how can people find you?
Oh, I'm pretty easy to find. My website, sallyhelgesen.com. I'm active on LinkedIn. That's the social media platform I prefer because people are very positive on LinkedIn, and I think that's a good thing. And there's a contact button on my website as well. So lots of different paths to being in touch with me.
Perfect. Well, this is the great and wonderful Sally Helgesen and her book, How Women Rise. You can find that on Amazon and everywhere, I'm sure, also. And her course on women's leadership is in Methods of Leaders, found at methodsof.com. Thank you so much, Sally, for joining us today. I'm Janice Perkins with Methods. Thank you all for listening.